Hi, this is Jeff Owens from the Classic Horrors Club podcast. Welcome to the video companion for episode 55, Enter the Inner Sanctum. This video contains highlights and bonus features from the full podcast, which you can find on SoundCloud at the link shown below. Richard, I'm so glad I get to pick the music because I was able to find another Pet Shop Boys song that goes with this month's episode. That was Inner Sanctum by Pet Shop Boys from their 2016 album Super, available on Apple Music. And again, with the exception, as you just mentioned, of last month's rather, how would you describe the morning after?
Challenging.
Yeah, so we're back to the peppy, let's go, let's have a fun episode. So that's what we're going to do.
Clearly had to have been inspired by Inner Sanctum. I mean, that's where the name Inner Sanctum came from. So, and it's been a part of our pop culture ever since. So every time you watch, they've mentioned it on The Simpsons or whatever, whenever they mention the Inner Sanctum, it goes back to what we are watching and people were listening to back in the day.
Yeah, so the Inner Sanctum is a whole big thing with a lot of different media types. We're specifically going to focus on 6 movies that came out in the golden age of horror in the mid-40s. But with Richard's knowledge of old-time radio and we're going to learn a lot about the whole franchise, really. But focusing on those 6 movies, all starring Lon Chaney Jr. So this is sort of a Lon Chaney Jr. mini episode also.
We've covered Lon Chaney Jr. on the show before, so we're gonna do less on who Lon Chaney Jr. is. I think At this point, if you're this many episodes into the show, I hope that you know who Lon Chaney Jr. is. But we're gonna kind of focus on what I think are kind of unique because I mean, in this time period, a lot of the movies he was playing, right? Wolfman and Frankenstein monsters and mummies, and this was an opportunity in these 6 films for him to play the kind of dashing leading man without having to wear makeup and without turning into a monster. And it was allowing him to kind of show off his acting chops a little bit. And unfortunately, not too long after this series wrapped up, his own personal life began to kind of take a turn, which I suppose we'll touch on a little bit. But this is like Lon Chaney in his prime, 43 to 45, dashing. He's got that mustache. He's just looking the part. And I think these movies just show off what I think really could have been. He could have, and he did, obviously play in other films and other non-horror films, but I think there was some potential for him to have gone on and maybe done even bigger and better things had he not had a taste for, the liquor, and that it aged him greatly. When you look at 45 to like 52, when he does The Black Castle with Boris Karloff, and you see him in that film, even from like 48 to 52, after he wraps up Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and then just 4 years later, he's aged a lot in that 4 years, and it took its toll on him. So this is Lon Chaney when he's in his prime, looking good.
Yeah, so this should be a good, solid episode. 6 movies. Let's see if we can go 12 hours with this podcast. Well, let's welcome everyone to episode 55 of the Classic Horrors Club podcast. I am Jeff Owens from classichorrors.club.
And I am Richard Chamberlain from kccinephile.com and monstermoviekid.wordpress.com.
We also want to say hello to our audience on YouTube that is watching the video companion to the Classic Horrors Club podcast. Let's say hello to them. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us either way. And if you're watching one, we invite you to watch or listen to the other.
This is the Inner Sanctum, a strange, fantastic world controlled by a mass of living, pulsating flesh. The mind. It destroys, distorts, creates monsters, commits murder. Yes, even you, without knowing, can commit murder.
Final rankings of the 6 movies. Let's start at the bottom and go up to the top, kind of explain a little bit. This is for both our audio listeners and our video watchers. My number 6 least favorite is Calling Dr. Death. I think you probably agree with that. Maybe not.
I do. When I started off the podcast, it was number 5 for me, but reconfiguring it as we've talked through, it definitely comes in at number 6 for me. It's my least favorite, I think, for the same reasons as you.
Yeah, none of these are technically brilliant films. They're not going to win any awards. I'm watching them and rating them strictly for entertainment value, and this was the least entertaining to me, so that's why I put it at the bottom.
I'd agree.
My number 5 might be controversial. I think you liked it more than I did, and that is The Frozen Ghost.
Be too sure of your answer. You may change your mind. The Inner Sanctum has a story for you of hypnotic horror in which murder is done by the mind.
This man's dead. Still think you killed that man with your eyes?
Shut up and let me alone, will you?
What I do is my business.
I don't care what you do. But get this straight. As long as I'm around here, you're going to leave this girl alone.
You killed her.
Nina!
Don't come near me. Don't touch me.
Nina.
It's not my number 5, but it's very, very close as I reconfigured things. For me, number 5 is Dead Man's Eyes. And I think as we talked about that one, it fell a little flat. I think it was, I enjoyed it, but the Gene Parker, it really comes down to Gene Parker. She just ruined the film for me. I just couldn't get into her character, and the rest kind of unravels. And again, being honest, Aquanetta is not an A-list star. She's not a B-list star. It'll be interesting when we do that film series next month to see how her lack of solid acting, was a weakness in this film. Is it going to be potentially a strength in those films? I don't know. But for here, it hurt the film. So Dead Man's Eyes for me is number 5.
Yeah, anyone whose name sounds like a hairspray, I'm suspicious of. And Frozen Ghost, to me, I loved the wax museum setting, but it just didn't work out. Some of the complications in the plot, just in the confusion about the whole setup and everything. So that one left me a little bit puzzled. What was your number 4?
Well, number 4 for me is Frozen Ghost. So not too far off from you. I still enjoyed that one, more than the other two, which is why it kind of comes in right in the middle. I love the Wax Museum setup. That really covers some of the other plot holes or deficiencies, as we talked about the leap from getting Gregor the Great to all of a sudden now somehow being at the Wax Museum. And I never was entirely sure what he's really doing there. That aside, I love Martin Kozlik's performance and love the Wax Museum setting. Always is fun to have that in a movie, and it helps this movie. Whatever deficiencies it has, it helped it for me.
Yeah, and my number 4, it actually could. I'm debating between it and number 5, Frozen Ghost. So Frozen Ghost might have been my number 4, except I did at this moment like Strange Confession a little bit better than Frozen Ghost. With a better ending, it would have been even higher in the list. I really enjoyed it. The setup, the story, the tragedy that Lon Chaney Jr. went through, but that ending just fell flat.
Okay, so number 3, right? We're up to number 3.
Yeah, what's yours?
Number 3 for me would be Pillow of Death. I will say
Really?
the worst title out of all 6 films.
Don't rate it on that.
I know, no.
I want to accuse my husband Wayne of murdering me.
Gaze through this man's eyes into a black, unholy secret. Walk beyond this door to unseen crime. Listen to a witch's tale of twisted love and whispering murder.
Who are you? Are you ready to confess you murdered your wife and the others, Wayne Fletcher? Confess, Fletcher. You know you killed him.
So we're looking at the top 3 films now. Really the top 4 films I enjoyed, and so it's just there's very little separating 1 from 2 from 3 from 4. 5 and 6 are definitely a little farther down the list. So Pillow of Death, what makes it better than Frozen Ghost for me is the old dark house setting. Whereas Wax Museums, old dark house settings, they're both cool things. The old dark house plays a bigger role in this movie than the Wax Museum does in Frozen Ghost. So that's why it kind of gives it the edge, because that was really a good selling point. Plus, the cast is really solid in this one. Some zany characters, Julian, which that's almost worth a bump up a point just for his weird character. It's just a solid film for me, except for that final scene, which falls flat for me. But and we were talking, I was kind of like juggling things around and stuff. You did make me see that another weakness that I thought the movie had actually really wasn't the weakness, because I kind of missed that foreshadowing. And now that I see that, I was like, okay, yeah, that kind of saves that weak point for me, kind of scratches it off the list. So solid film in the series. The only thing I really didn't care for was that very last scene.
My number 3, which is going to be controversial, is Weird Woman. I know that's probably most people's number 1. It's definitely the best made, the most technically proficient film. It's good. I didn't enjoy it as much as my top 2.
It's definitely a solid film in the series, and I can see why a lot of people place it at number 1. I think that I'm just trying to, without giving away my thing too early, but to say that I think people automatically compare it to Burn Witch Burn. And I think that either helps or hurts the film. It's kind of hard for the film to kind of stand on its own because there's always that comparison, right, to Burn Witch Burn.
Burn, witch, burn. Norman, your picture! Norman, no, not your picture!
Tansy!
Norman, not your picture!
Heavens
Norman,
sake.
no!
Are there supernatural powers her scientific husband denies exists?
I want some kind of explanation.
But is it obvious? I'm a witch.
Can another woman's fiendish jealousy possess and injure her?
Don't answer it.
Hello.
Hang up, Norman!
Take me in your arms. Oh, Norman. After you've undressed me with your eyes,
Is this woman really a voodoo witch, conjuring evil spirits to do her sinister bidding? Shocking powers of witchcraft. Powers that can even bring a stone eagle to life.
How you feel about Burn Witch Burn is either going to elevate the film or it's going to decrease it a little bit because you're going to immediately compare it. I'll leave on that note.
All right. So what was your number 3? Did we do that yet?
We did. Number 3 was Pillow of Death. So we're up to number 2. So my number 2 would be Strange Confession. And this one again, I'm sitting there juggling between Pillow of Death and Frozen Ghost. And we were talking, Strange Confession really bumped up because I really got, again, I didn't like the wraparound segments, but I really loved everything in between. And again, Brenda Joyce and, J. Carrol Naish just really helped the film along. I think that even despite the down ending, which was a little unfortunate up to this point, everything had been good, and then we get to these last 2 films and well, things don't go so well for Lon. After good things in the first 4 films, it goes south. But I think just everything is solid about this movie. I love the script. I love the way everything kind of came together. You could elevate this movie by taking away the opening and closing segment and somehow wrapping up the story maybe a little differently, and you wouldn't have needed the Strange Confession because it really didn't play a big part in the movie. It's a plot device just in order to share the story, but really the end falls very, very flat for me, but not enough so that it deters the rest of the film, much as the case like with Pillow of Death. For some reason, the ending of that one, it falls a little more flat, which is why I rank it 1 below Strange Confession. The ending of Strange Confession, despite the fact that I disliked the wraparound, the rest of the film for me was just a little more solid than Pillow of Death.
Yeah, if you're going to have that wraparound, you need a big payoff. Think of all the anthology films, how those end. It's with You know,
You
and
need the
that
payoff.
definitely lacked that. Was that your 3 or 2?
That's number 2 for me. So what's your number
then we
2?
know what your number 1 is. So go ahead.
Well, my number 1 is Weird Woman.
This is the Inner Sanctum.
Thick stones, jungle gods.
You don't know what you're doing!
I do!
Norman, no!
Woman or witch, temptress or killer, weaving a death curse with the black magic of an ancient cult. Starring Lon Chaney, Anne Gwynn, Evelyn Ankers, with Lois Collier, Ralph Morgan, Elizabeth Risden, Elizabeth Russell.
This house is full of something evil. Evil? Yes, it's you. Don't.
Why are you terrorizing my wife?
I don't even care anymore what people are saying, laughing at me.
Oh, stop it. I never asked for such devotion from you, and I don't want it.
Answer. Hello?
Yes, I'm going to go along with the rest of the pack. I love this movie. Trying to say if there's anything weak or anything, there isn't. And so that's why it just slightly edges out Strange Confession, Pill of Death, and Frozen Ghost, because each of those films, ran a little cattail just popped up. Each of those films has something weak in it, right? It's not, for me, a perfect film from beginning to end. Weird Woman, for me, I was like, well, there's not really anything that falls flat for me. Everything works for me from beginning to end. And as we said, there's certain elements of Weird Woman that I like better than Burn Witch Burn. I can see, though, people compare, and I am not familiar with the original story. I understand there are some differences, but, comparing it to Burn Witch Burn, a movie which I really enjoyed, I enjoyed this one a little bit better. And I like the voodoo aspect as opposed to the witch aspect, and the character discovering, Paula's discovering this new world, and she doesn't get quite as freaked out when everything starts to crumble, because she's trying to be convinced that what she believes in isn't necessarily the right thing. There was no convincing Janet Blair's character in Burn Witch Burn, right? She was pretty adamant that witchcraft was, what she did, and she was much more hysterical than Paula is. And that, to me, is why I would think this movie is just a little more enjoyable than Burn Witch Burn. And because there's not really anything in the movie that falls flat for me, is why it's my most favorite of the series.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, my number 2, Dead Man's Eyes. I really love that setup. Lots
That's
of fun.
probably the biggest difference. I think that's really the biggest difference for us, as far as, there's a few, obviously your number 1's different than mine, but that's a big difference.
My number 1's Pillow of Death. Hands down, for me, the most entertaining from beginning to end. I loved the ending. I think it was, for me, the best twist. I didn't see it coming. Nothing about that ending bothered me like it did you. If I were to have to watch another one of these tonight, it'd be Pillow of Death.
It's a solid movie. The end doesn't ruin it for me at all. So, if I had to sit there right now looking at these movies, is there any of these movies that I would say I don't want to revisit? No. Even my least favorites, Calling Dr. Death and Dead Man's Eyes, I would revisit those movies, because you know what? I might enjoy them more the second time around. They may not be as solid for me as the others, but this was a fun film series.